Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, Patrick Donoghue here, news editor with the Irish Farmers Journal. In this week's Irish Farmers Journal, our motoring editor Michael Moroney reports on increasing difficulties with motor tax for jeeps and vans. Many councils are refusing to apply the commercial rate, which costs farmers hundreds of euro, as Michael explained to our digital editor Thomas Hubert.
There has been a change in terms of a tightening up of the regulations. The regulations have been in place for some time, but county councils have the leniency, in a sense, to interpret them or to use them at their own discretion. And at the moment, there's a significant tightening up of the regulations by some county councils, which make it more difficult for farmers with 4x4 commercials or small vans, make it a bit more difficult to get the tax renewed on them.
So what kind of difference are we talking about if you were used to the commercial rate of tax and now you're being refused it? What happens in terms of your finances?
Well, if we take, say, a popular 4x4 commercial such as a Toyota Land Cruiser or Land Rover Discovery, well, typically the commercial tax rate on that is €333. Under a regime where your local authority refuses to allow you to have commercial tax, that could increase to more than €1,200. So that's a very significant increase, a significant additional cost for any farming family.
What are the requirements if you're trying to keep your commercial rate and your council is a bit more strict in implementing their regulations tightly? Well,
they are saying, they want a clear paper trail. They want a lot of information. In the first instance, they want you to sign what's called an RF111A, a goods declaration form, which you declare you'll not use this vehicle for anything other than work purposes. And I suppose that has to be enforced by the guards, and there tends to be a level of leniency around that. Importantly, there has to be a certificate of roadworthiness, which is your DOE test, and each van or 4x4 has to undergo that every year once it's 1 year old or older. And another important point is that they are requiring an original commercial insurance certificate, which is a different certificate to what you'd have on a private car, because it gives you cover for the purposes of work specifically. And they're quite important, they're fairly standard, and then local councils have interpreted it a little bit different. Some of them are looking for a range of options, either evidence of registration for VAT, a tax clearance certificate, or a notice of tax registration, or even a self-assessment letter from the revenue to confirm that you are a self-assessed taxpayer.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot more paperwork than you would be used to, or that you could even get together for your tax. Any reason why, Michael, the councils are going down this route at the moment?
Well, just to say, in the past, there was some councils were happy to run with a situation where if farmers come in, they were satisfied with their tax, with their herd number, for example, or flock number, or a tax clearance certificate. But that was an option that was left open to them, and some of them have used it. But it appears now that it's very clear when you look at the websites of the various county councils, Meath, I've looked at Kerry and Tipperary, etc., and they make it quite clear that this is not acceptable anymore. Thomas, the reason why it's happened, I mean, we can only, based on conjecture, look at what's happened in terms of the revenues for the county councils. And in the 2016 budget, in response to significant lobbying from the road haulage sector, the Minister for Finance reduced the tax on heavy trucks by €4,295, which was a massive cut in the cost of taxing a heavy truck. Now, just translate that into income for county councils, and if you look at the numbers, there are in excess of 10,500 heavy trucks. These would be trucks rated at more than 12 tonnes in the country. And therefore, just to do the sums on that, to do the maths on it, it looks like as if that drop in income for local authorities is in the region of €45 million. So, across the country, motor tax offices in the various county councils are becoming starved for cash, and it looks like as if the increase in the tightening up of regulations for the 4x4 commercials and smaller vans is as a result of that.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much. You have all the details in this week's Irish Farmers Journal and at farmersjournal.ie.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
More than 900 animals were sold at a distressed farm sale in County Cork this Tuesday. The Irish Farmers Journal news correspondent Odile Evans was there, and she met the anti-eviction activist Jerry Beads, who was prevented from protesting at the sale by a court order.
Well, I still haven't received a signed copy of the order, and at 5 o'clock this morning I emailed the solicitors and I haven't heard anything from them since.
So, as far as you're convinced, it's not valid, essentially?
Well, a court order has to be a signed court order by the register. More important, has to be perfected on the courts.ie website, and we've been checking it and it's still not perfected, so there's no court order.
So maybe you could give me a bit of background and your view on this and why you were supposed to be served it in the first place.
Well, it would appear that the sheriff decided to go to the High Court yesterday to get an injunction, and which is her right. She attached it to me. Most of the contents of the affidavit that I've seen is all incorrect, and it is all to do with the Kingstons, and we were here actually to do with the machinery men who were owed the money and the creditors. And what brought to our attention was the fact that the sheriff and the receiver have spent $1.5 million since they took over possession, and the debt was only 2.4. So what we were out to do was to expose the farming community what's going on here, and then Peter Kingston spoke out and said that they wouldn't negotiate with it, even when they tried to buy the loan back and whatever else. So there's a whole history. This is a complete disaster for the family. Similar disasters are facing thousands of farmers around the country.
There's been a massive big herd sale here today. The entire herd's essentially in Cradenhill, and the cows sold for way under their actual market price value. What's the general feeling that you're getting from people here?
People are just absolutely disgusted. I mean, if the receiver and the sheriff had gone about this in a proper to recover the bank's debt and not rack up fees and make money for themselves, this whole matter should have been handled in a different way. The Kingstons were willing to work with them. They didn't oppose the sheriff coming in or the receiver, and it's quite clear. Even the affidavits, the sheriff has now trying to what I would say is the sheriff is trying to cover her tracks and make out that there was actually no food. It's in the papers that there was no food for animals, yet the machinery men that were here had brought in are owed huge sums of money for drawing in silage and other feed into the farm, so the place was full according to them.
Definitely food in there anyway.
Yeah, there was definitely. So I mean, what's stated in the High Court now, the question I'd ask is, what does she know about farming? The affidavits that she filled out. She's a solicitor, and she's filled out affidavits with authority, and they all have to be refuted. And I'm no farmer, but I can see it's absolute nonsense. And I understand some people that have looked at them said it's absolute all rubbish. And this is what ends up in the High Court. But what this case has done is it's put centre stage what's been going on in receiverships from business. It's now affecting farming, and it's out of control. It's unlicensed, unregulated, and we've had the Master of the High Court, I keep referring to Ed Honan, speaking out. He referred to receivers as thievers in a newspaper article last November. He spoke out last night on the Clareborn show about debt, and the government was willing to sell the debt, to reduce the debt. There was a proposal during the bank guarantee talks in 2008 for a 30 to 50% write-down on debt. And it didn't happen. And now we find the debt has been sold for 20% to hedge funds and overseas investors by the government. By the last government, Michael Noonan was responsible for all of this mess, and there's been no joined up thinking on behalf of government, and now farmers are facing wipeout. In particular, it comes at a time when agriculture is on its knees.
I mean, there's been a huge number of security here today as well. How have you been treated today?
Well, I mean, I didn't go near the premise. I stayed on the public road, but it was clear to everybody, massive sums of money spent on securing a farm. It was like a circus more. Catering contractors brought in, seating inside in sheds and farm sheds. I just think it's outrageous that a bank can spend money and spend $1.5 million to date, and the way they're going, they'll have spent the $2.4 million before it's ever got to the land. And in the meantime, they basically set fire to the Kingston's herd. They may as well have set fire to what it was sold for today. So, I mean, it's a lesson. It's a very expensive lesson. But I think the publicity around it, and I think the sympathy for the Kingstons, from everybody around. And I think Michael Collins, a local TD who recently elected, was refused entry to it. He just could not believe what he was seeing going on there. And so hopefully Michael Collins and Matty McGrath wasn't able to get down today because he's at talks in government buildings where he was on the phone to a few people several times. And Matty has been at a number of these evictions. He understands it, and as far as he's concerned, this has to be part of the programme for government to deal with this debt issue.
Thanks, Jerry.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
More than 50 farmers braved the cold and rain to take part in the Dairylink farm work in Mill Isle, County Down on Tuesday. William Conlon was there for the Irish Farmers Journal, and he spoke with one of the participants, Enda Duffy.
So Enda, what did you make of the farm walk today? Did you think it was beneficial?
I did definitely think it was beneficial, and it was good to see that whatever Bill's been on the programme for 15 months at this stage, and there's signs of change being made, and everything's got towards making the bottom line more profitable, more money in his pocket, and making them far more sustainable going into the future is what's needed for the industry as a whole.
And what you saw today, cows going out and the rain coming down, what did you make of that? Was he brave or?
Yeah, well that's I think probably one of the key things we got from the walk is to get the cows out. They look far happier out in the field than they were, standing under a shed roof looking out. I know, and a lot of even from myself, once you open the back door, the cows don't be long leaving. They'll make their mind up which they prefer doing. And as I say, the amount of grass that has grown as a result of getting out early has probably added another 5,000 or 6,000 into Bill's pocket at the end of the day.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Social media went into overdrive during the IFA pay scandal last year, but has the momentum continued during the election? Irish Farmers Journal social media journalist Aisling Hussey looks into the online conversation in this week's Irish Farmers Journal and on farmersjournal.ie. She shared her observation with Thomas Hubert.
Aisling, who is winning the election so far on social media?
Well, it looks like Joe Healy is winning the election on social media, and it's not through volume of tweets, it's through clever posting, personable kind of posts, like he posts like selfies on farms, he posts like funny farming pictures, things like that, like things that would appeal to the public, and especially younger farmers as well.
I remember seeing him shearing sheep and things like that. Yeah.
That was one of his first photos. All right. It was like, look at me, here I am, I'm a normal farmer. Whereas you look at Henry Burns' feed, and he has tweeted far more than the other candidates, and I believe his wife is behind the scenes tweeting at IFA hustings, but that hasn't delivered in terms of followers or engagement either, it seems. It kind of shows that it's quality over quantity, really. And also making sure it's a two-way conversation, not just you pushing your message out there. People obviously want, kind of someone who's a bit more, someone who's kind of relatable, and they feel that they can talk to.
Has this two-way conversation happened during the campaign?
It has, I suppose, in bits and pieces. Like, you'd see them replying all right to people. Joe Healy does seem to be the most open candidate, so he's kind of really inviting people to talk to him and, share the things he's posting. Whereas the other candidates are kind of more using social media just as a means to push what they're promoting out there, like, links to press releases and, live tweeting hustings. There's no real invitation to talk there. So I suppose I haven't really seen evidence of a two-way conversation happening, really. And
that's quite different to the moment of the crisis last year with the pay scandal in November and December, right? Well, what did you see at that point?
Well, we saw it ourselves in our own channels on Facebook and Twitter. We had a lot of farmers commenting and tweeting and, having a discussion amongst themselves, actually, about what was going on. I suppose at the time, the IFA wasn't really responding to any of this on social media because it was all so unprecedented, but it gave people a forum to express their anger. And I suppose as well we saw people tweeting defence as well of the IFA. There's certain amount of people doing that too, but I suppose it's something that organisations like the IFA just have to deal with now. It was something that never kind of factored before, and now say Eddie Downey appearing on Morning Ireland, he never would have received that attention before on social media, and there's this stream of tweets. And then that frames the narrative then for going forward for other, radio programmes and, articles that are appearing, because people in the media are looking at what's being said and the kind of sentiment being expressed by the public, and that obviously shapes then what's being said moving forward.
What impact does it have at this stage, as this conversion to the social media scene happened for the IFA? I know the general elections tend to be, in the last few years, maybe the first election defined by social media. We've heard those kind of statements made before. Can we say that of the IFA election?
Well, I wouldn't say that anything being posted is going to impact on the actual outcome of the election. I suppose given as well the age profile of IFA voters, maybe a lot of them wouldn't be really engaged on Facebook and Twitter. But moving forward, like, it's going to be a very important campaigning tool. I think next time around we're definitely going to see a much like slicker and sophisticated use of social media as well. Like, really, this has been the first time the IFA has used social media in campaigns. It's kind of been ignored up to this point, and we can even see the volume of tweets being sent this time around as opposed to last time. I think the IFA sees that it needs to treat social media the same as any other form of media, like such as radio or interviews with newspapers and things like that. But like in years to come, it's only going to grow in importance for the IFA.
Okay, Aisling, thank you very much. You have a very detailed story online this week and in the Irish Farmers Journal with interviews with PR experts, with Eddie Downey himself. You spoke to him exclusively, so readers can find more details at farmersjournal.ie and in this week's paper. Thank you.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
In the Wicklow uplands, farmers are preparing their own locally led agro-environmental scheme. Odile Evans continues her series on the topic in this week's Irish Farmers Journal, and she met Pat Dunn, the chairman of the IFA National Hill Committee.
In 2000, when the burning dates was changed, it left it almost impossible to legally burn on a hill. Decoupling had a big effect as well, because people didn't have to keep the stock any longer for to draw down the single farm payment. Aging population, people were getting older, weren't as well able to go. The Celtic Tiger, when it was going, and the amount of off-farm work there was, and good money that was there to be got.
So for you then, is a programme like this about preserving habitats, about preserving life on the hills? What is the key driver?
I would say the key driver is to get young people back farming on the hills. And in that way, the hills would be managed, because it's been showed quite clearly time and time again that the most cost-effective way of managing the hills is to keep the farmers farming the hills.
This obviously in turn would have an impact on agri-tourism and that kind of thing. Yes. And Wicklow's famous for that.
Wicklow's famous for hill walking. If the hills were kept in good condition, that's what tourists want to see when they come out. There'd be a lot of similarities between Wicklow and the Blackstairs. Very similar type of terrain. It'd be the same challenge. It would be mainly to deal with undergrazing.
On your actual proposed scheme, what do farmers get the rewards for?
The rewards would be for carrying out, if there was, the plan drawn up, if there was essential maintenance that had to be done. The payments would have to be realistic.
Yeah.
There'd be no point in some sort of an old Mickey Mouse scheme that, just through a small amount of. It'd have to be a realistic fee.
Return on work, essentially.
Return for work. Yeah. You can't expect young people to.
Yeah.
You can't expect young people, if there's a young person that wants to go on and rear a family or whatever, should have to have a viable income. Well, the loss, for example, falls very short of what reps was. Okay. The reps payment. Like, you have a max payment of 5,000 in loss. Yeah. And there was a max payment of about 12,500 in reps. But the thing about the reps was, if you had the land, if you had the amount of hill land, you could draw down, SAC land, you could draw down the reps. But there wasn't much checking done to see what it was doing.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Meanwhile, our market specialist Phelim O'Neill was in Norway. There he met Sven Arild, a local farmer representative who defends the country small farm model.
Sven has a very modern farm in which he milks 60 odd cows and feeds the bull calves and buy in some extra ones as well. Sven, you represent farmers through the Farmers Union, but it's not just large modern farmers like your farm that you feel is important. You feel that the small farm and supporting small farming in Norway is equally important.
Yes, that's very important. You know that Norway is a big country, and we have much mountain and sea, and the area is not so big, but it's very important that the farmers who live in this area still want to produce milk.
Why is it important for Norway? I know that only, I think it's 3% of your land is suitable for agriculture and suitable for farming. Why do you not take the approach that other parts of the world say, that these small farms aren't efficient, that we need larger farms with more cattle and more livestock and more grain, etc.? You in Norway appear to take a completely different view to the rest of the world.
Yes, but we have only 3% with area, and 2% of this is for grass. And shall we produce food for the people, then we must use all the area. And then is it so that we must produce milk and meat in the grass on areas.
You have an annual negotiation with government each year. What would your priorities be for the Farmers Union this year in those negotiations which are about to start? Are you happy with prices at the moment? Do you feel that there needs to be investment in smaller farms to make them ready for 2024 and free-range cattle, for example?
The price is quite good. The most important is that it will be good enough production for the smaller, because the last years it has been so that we produce more and more. But when you have a little farm with quite little area, then that will don't give enough money. So then is it important that we help them with investment, so they can continue with on maybe 15, 20, 25 cows.
So for you, the priority isn't so much farmers that are of a very large and very modern scale like yourself. Your priority for the Farmers Union is that all effort be directed towards assisting smaller farmers remain in successful production.
Yes.
Sven, thank you very much.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Finally, let's hear from Irish Country Living health correspondent Margaret Hawkins. She met a farming family from County Offaly who were faced with a rare case of juvenile arthritis in their young daughter. Margaret tells Ciara Leahy about the joint disease and the support available for those affected.
It's the sort of story that I suppose it would be most parents' nightmare. You have a lovely little child, 21 months old, and she's suddenly limping one day, and you think maybe she hurt herself on the slide or had a knock or something like that, and then it happens again or gets worse, and you end up going to A&E and another A&E and another A&E, and nobody believes that there's something serious wrong. They think it's a virus, but eventually you get the diagnosis of juvenile arthritis. And people would say, what's juvenile arthritis? Well, I suppose the best way to think about it is rheumatoid arthritis, where you've got those painful flare-ups, and it's all a bit unpredictable, and you do get joint damage after the flare-ups. So it's a very, very worrying illness, and for it to happen to a small child, as I say, it's not the sort of thing that any parent would want to happen.
Absolutely, and I suppose because it's so uncommon as well, you know, obviously that doctors were probably not even looking out for it.
No, they wouldn't have been. It's something that I suppose that happens so seldom. But in this case, the family that I talked to, the mother from West Offaly, I mean, her instinct was that there was something wrong, that there was arthritis involved, and eventually they did get the diagnosis and the good start, what was called the aggressive treatment of it, because the illness in Megan's case was aggressive. So it's really just, I suppose, the kind of things you don't want to think about. But getting in there and getting the diagnosis quickly is important.
I mean, it could sound so stressful for the family. Did they find that people just didn't understand how serious the illness was?
Yeah, I've come across this before with people who, you know, who have family members with maybe unusual illnesses. People didn't, you know, they'd say things like, sure, my child gets tired as well, or I have a bit of arthritis. But, you know, when you're standing there and you know your child is seriously ill, it's very hard to listen to. I suppose people are trying to be kind, or, you know, trying to grasp onto hope and things like that. Yeah. But it is, I suppose it just shows people don't know enough about it. So it's important that they be aware of it.
Because there's no rule book really in these situations.
No, not at all. And it's the more people understand it, I suppose, the easier it will be for people to know what to say, I suppose, on the street or in the car or wherever you happen to meet somebody or in the shop or whatever, something that doesn't kind of annoy them, that support and comfort.
Yeah, absolutely. So Margaret, what's the situation now? Megan, the little girl, how is she doing?
She's doing well at the moment. She's having what's called a biologic drug infusion every 2 weeks up in Crumlin Hospital, and it means.
And sorry, what age is she now?
She's 4 now. She's 4 now. So she's the last 2 years have been full of injections and tests and all sorts of things that you don't want your child to have to go through. Even daddy and mammy doing the injections, and while daddy may be a farmer and used to injecting cattle and things like that, Mummy hadn't ever given an injection to anything.
It's a whole different ball game,
Yeah, and you've no choice. You have cruel to be kind, but it's very hard, very, very difficult, very stressful all round. But she's doing well at the moment, and she's having that every 2 weeks. So the hopes that this particular medication will agree with her. It takes a while sometimes to find the right medication for anybody. So they'll keep going with this and see how she responds to it.
And what does the medication do?
Well, I suppose it gets rid of the inflammation and the pain and maybe stops the progression of the illness. That would be the thing. There last summer she was on one particular medication and it seemed to be doing really well. She was able to run around and that. And her mother and herself skipped out of the consultant's room on one occasion. But unfortunately, a couple of months later, her ankle started to swell again and there was another flare-up coming, so this is when now she's been put on the twice, every second week, having this drug infusion. So it is a very worrying time. It's an emotional roller coaster, but people should really know it's out there and that, what it is and what people are really going through. The whole family lives the illness, really.
Absolutely. And I suppose, support groups are essential, to making, as you said, people more aware. And I believe the family got a lot of help from a support group. Could you tell me a little about that?
Yeah, there's a support group called I Can, which is very positive. It's Dairylink, a very good positive name for it. And it was started by parents, talking in hospitals, people in the same boat as themselves, and they support one another. And when new parents, get in touch, they're obviously in a panic, they're totally worried, and they're able to talk to parents who are further down the line, where the world hasn't ended. There have been challenges and things, but they're able to get that kind of comfort and support from talking to people, and they meet up, and the children meet up and so on, and have their own days where they can talk to friends who know what it's like to deal with all the needles and hospitalisation and everything. So it's really important that people make use of those support groups, and that they're great at giving their time voluntarily to help others.
Absolutely. And just to finish up, you were saying that one of these fundraising event days is on May 21st?
Yeah, that's the Heavens, the family I interviewed, are organising that, and it's called the Croken Hill Challenge, and it's on Saturday, May the 21st. So if anybody's into hill walking and wants to contribute a few bob, even a small amount, to the ICANN organisation, they'll see more about that on the Facebook if they look up Croken Hill Challenge.
And of course there's more details about that in this week's Irish Country Living. Margaret, thanks so much, and we wish the family the very best of luck, and all those involved in ICANN as well.
We do indeed. Thank you very much, Ciara.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app, and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.